Welcome to the Political Insider, and today we are speaking to the ultimate political insider, a man who knows his way around the parliament buildings, from the august opposition benches to now with his own party, and that is Mmusi Maimane. Mmusi, welcome to the Political Insider.
Thank you very much. I like to play the inside role of reformer, so that's why I'm on the inside, not to be like the inside, but to try and change the inside.
And to everybody that may be watching this for the first time, the intention with Political Insight is to hear from people who are inside there, where it's not conjecture from the outside, but to hear what's actually going on. And nobody can do this better than Mmusi, so that's why we've got him, and hopefully this becomes a regular thing. Mmusi, let's kick off with something that has just for years sort of sat there, a quiet grumble every couple of months, but suddenly it's reached a crescendo, and that is the poor performance of the National Prosecuting Authority, that now has to answer a lot of questions about their performance over the last couple of years.
I mean, let's start with the first thing. When Advocate Batoyi was appointed as National Director of Public Prosecutions, let's not forget that she was moving after a number of years where the National Prosecuting Authority was losing credibility. We were just soon after state capture, so all of us were quite excited. I actually wanted her to succeed, but I must concede I've been deeply disappointed in Advocate Batoyi for a number of reasons. The first is that she had come in to reform the institution and the senior leadership of the organization. In many ways, you've seen some departures, but I feel that we could have done much, much better on that score, just to make sure that we have a competent, a strong, a very, 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 very aggressive National Prosecuting Authority. The second thing is, I felt that more than anything, that she hasn't fought hard enough for budget cuts. And in essence, you can say all you like about wanting to fight corruption, but if you don't fund the institutions that fund corruption, SIU, NPA, etc., they become hamstrung and they stop attracting incredible prosecutors who are able to see cases through. The third is the number of prominent cases that they have battled to fight and get through, none notwithstanding the Amatoso trial. But it just seems as though the NPA is not on a track of winning high-profile cases. Now, you're going to win all of them, but it's important for citizens to know that actually the NPA is capable of winning in a country where we can talk about it on another day, but surely the crime stats tell us that at least the conviction rates for murder can't be 1 in 5. It's the crime stats tell us, let alone the crime stats, the corruption stats tell us that from the state capture report, you can't not have seen high-profile members being able to be put back in jail. That should have been the NPA's flagship. I suspect that if you arrested a few of high-profile cases, you would have been able to get groundswell of people wanting to see more funding towards the NPA so that we can deliver. And then for me, the most disturbing was probably this weekend. That Advocate Batoyi went out in public and said that there's been broad infiltration of the NPA, and then, after a meeting with the minister, backtracks on that statement, to me, is bowing to political pressure. It cannot be any other way. Because if the Minister of Justice is able to then come back out, at least as the reports say, to say that, look, we're gonna speak to the president, etc., I just find that unacceptable from the National Director of Public Prosecutions. So I'm afraid on this NPA, we need reform and we need it quick.
Mmusi, are we not getting into a bit of a difficult situation? This issue of we don't have enough funding, I'm quite confused by that because, listen, no business has got enough funding, no operation has got enough funding, your political party doesn't have enough funding, and so on and so forth. Nobody ever says, oh, we've got too much money. And you surely make do with what you've got. This seems to me like a diversionary tactic to say, oh, we need more funding, then we do our job properly. Surely if you can then only prosecute, 10 corrupt people out of the state capture report, then you do those 10 people.
Well, the difficulty is that, the NPA in its relationship to the investigating units. So in other words, a case must be handed over to the NPA from the police in a manner that's able to do the job of being able to secure conviction or make sure the weight of the matter is correct. Now, in being able to do that, if you like, baton handing over, you often find the quality of information poor. You often find that actually, when it comes to even at the starting point, the issue of policing itself, the police budget goes up, 81% of it is spent on personnel. It isn't spent on actual building of technology, making sure the statements are good, etc., which puts a load on the NPA's ability to be able to get quality information, to be able to secure convictions. So NPA investigators, prosecutors, are often not always the best that are coming to work in the institutions. So eventually, when the case and the evidence is produced, it is poor at best, and ultimately it doesn't secure conviction. So what we really need is rather than eliminating, and I think the lack of money issue isn't important as it speaks to compared to what? If you say to me, you are funding VIP protection for politicians, well, I would say that's money wasted. You rather take that money, put it in the NPA so that you can attract the best prosecutors, you can be able to ensure the evidence that you present is of high caliber to secure convictions. At this stage in time, you are hamstringing the NPA, protecting the politicians, and ultimately in this country, justice is not being seen to be done. I hold the absolute view. I would reform the entire institution. I'd make it focus on priority cases, like any other prosecutorial authority in the world. You're not gonna be able to arrest everybody that's committing a crime, as much as that's what we'd like to see. But the fact on the table is target your top 200. If you set yourself a target and say your top people who are committing the serious crime, and we're going to do everything that we can to put them behind bars. And today, the fact that even on the high profile cases that were in the state capture report, there was profound failure, tells me the fact that we've still got a long way to go.
I want to just ask two questions, but they kind of link to one another. One is being the crazy performance in not digitizing our justice system. The question is, who's responsible for that? And the second question is kind of on the same line. Do you think the ANC as the ruling party for the last 3 decades has just never stopped damaging the criminal justice system because they know many of their members are going to be implicated?
It's why. Let me start with the second, and then I'll finish with the digitization process. On the second, political meddling in the justice system is a chronic historic problem in this country. The fact of the matter is that when parties all over the world fear that ultimately they want, or if their sole objective is to capture the state, privatize it, protect political interests, the almost immediate step is to almost politicize the justice system. You move from the rule of law to the rule of man. You ultimately make sure rulings are biased, they are political at best, and ultimately do not serve justice. And so what we began to see is that on a rotating door of national directors of public prosecutions, and this is a chronic history, in how they are appointed as a start, we need to reform that. We need to stop allowing the president to be able to, as President Zuma did, be able to pick the National Director of Public Prosecutions in the way they so choose. President Ramaphosa put out a public comment session to say, you can give your inputs about who should be the next. But frankly, it is still his decision as is put in the law. And I think there should be, in the same way as you appoint judges, there should be a commission that recommends to the president that involves parliament and multiple other players, so that that individual knows they're not just an appointment to the president, but they're also an appointment that serves the entire justice system. And so for me, this whole issue about how the even process of how you appoint the National Director of Public Prosecution has become the ANC's ultimate thing. Let's get the person who will do the job that is best and protect. And whether you get someone who's enthusiastic about making sure that they get the right people convicted, they bump their heads against politicians, they bump their heads against prosecutors who underneath them feel that their sole job is to protect the political patronage. And I would urge, let's reform the appointments. Let's make sure we can insulate the NPA as best as possible and fund it. Because I'd rather be spending money, even if oodles of money going into the NPA so that we can make sure that we stop the rot of corruption. Because I can promise you, Mike, we think national corruption is at its worst. You have not yet delved into the municipal corruption, and you have not delved with the inflationary pressure that corruption is putting. But on the first question about digitization must be a broad government process. It's not just only in the NPA, but it's a fact that the interrelationship between Home Affairs, the criminal justice system, any other, even hospitals. We need to be able to have a complete view of the citizen, so that if Mmusi commits a crime, the fingerprints are able to be accessible not only by the Department of Justice, but also by the police themselves, the Home Affairs, so that we know where I come from, what is the likely probability of prosecution, so that you have a single view of the citizen. So I do think rather than just narrowing it down to the NPA, let's digitize the whole state. We're dealing with, in certain instances, archaic issues. I mean, I can tell you, even in the Department of Health, as an example, your medical records, for example, if you are being treated in Gauteng, by the time you arrive in another province, the Department of Health doesn't know what medication you're on, how they can help you better, which makes the whole system inefficient. So you end up with these oodles and oodles of files, records in certain places, dockets missing. I still don't understand today, in a world of artificial intelligence, why we still have to poorly record statements by witnesses, whereas much of that work could have been digitized, reformed to make sure that we move. So what we've learned is that digital contracts end up being severely corrupted. We saw it in the IPTS, or not the IPTS, the National Treasury tried to introduce a system of digitization, and that was bungled up. So what we need is actual better ways of being able to put the specs out correctly, spend correctly, and make sure it delivers what we need.
Well, you're in Parliament. Let's hope that this gets onto the next agenda, which is the budget. Now, the budget is a very, very important issue. We know what happened with the Minister of Finance not being able to get his initial budget passed and a fiscal framework agreed, but now one seems to be agreed, but the debate happens this week, isn't it? Is it going to be
correct?
Going to be the budget as he put forward?
On Wednesday, the National Assembly votes on the fiscal framework, which is the broad overview of the budget. The budget is voted 3 times, if you like. There's the fiscal framework. The next will be the Division of Revenue Bill. And then lastly will be the Appropriations Bill, which deals with the national items. But here's for me the sad thing between version 1, version 2, and version 3. In all 3 of those versions, with the Minister of Finance, the only thing we've been discussing is tax. All we talk about is how we can tax people more. In the first, it was 2%. In the next one was 0.5%. In this one, it's the fuel levy. And that's the only discussion in this country, is where we're going to get the tax. And to quote someone, no nation has ever taxed itself to prosperity. The one number we're not looking at is the rate of investment. So when you look at South Africa relative to any other developing country, our rate of investment is less. When you compare us to SADC countries, our rate of investment is lower than even our neighboring countries. And when you look at our rate of building of infrastructure, so fixed asset capital formation, it tells us that we're not building anything. The easiest test anyone can make is look outside your window and count how many cranes are there. I was in Accra last week, and every street corner has got a crane because they're building something. You arrive in Johannesburg, Sandton, Cape Town, wherever. You can look around and you can discover very quickly there isn't building taking place. Construction as a contributor to GDP is all but plummeted. Mining the same. The reality of it is that the only sector that has been growing as far as employment is concerned is community and social services. That's what's been growing. That's what's been employing people. The only sector that's grown in GDP numbers but low on employment is the financial services sector, which tells us that the financial services are going to continue to grow, but they're not high employers because it's technical skills. So the question that we should all be obsessed about, which I find painfully missing inside the ANC's lexicon of discussion, is the fact that they're not thinking hard enough about how do we attract investment in this country. We go to the White House and literally we come up in many ways discussing issues that are not helpful in some ways to saying, how do we attract investment? The issue of crime in this country is a disincentive for people to come and invest here. So I would rather be looking at the budget with saying, how can we improve the policing budget so that if you do the crime, if you murder someone in this country, we'll lock you away and make a big public issue about it? Because at the end of the day, the one number we should be obsessed with is investment. I can tell you on Wednesday, people are going to debate the debt issue, the GDP issue. GDP is woeful in this country. The last quarter tells us at 0.1%. People are saying, no, we'll get to 1.7%, etc. No, we're not. I can tell you in the next quarter, post these tariff wars between the US, we're going to end up with lower rates of GDP growth, which means that even though last year people will tell you our economy did not grow because of load shedding, I can tell you we're at the lowest amount of load shedding we've ever had in any year in the last 15 years. But still, our GDP growth was 0.6%. So it's not just load shedding with respect. It must be policy. It must be the capability of government. But more than anything, it's the thesis. Why should someone come and invest here? And I'm afraid the GNU has not produced that thesis. No one can tell me how are we going to grow the South African economy. So for me, the fundamental focus that we should be all obsessed with is just saying, these are the areas of growth. This is what the focus is. How we deal with crime is ultimately making sure that we introduce stricter measures, technology, so that you do the crime, we will put you away for life, and no debate about that. If you are corrupt in this country, we'll do the same to you. We've got to think about what logistics look like. We've got to diversify our energy supply. And more than anything, we should be incentivizing businesses to say, we want you to do two things: invest in this country and employ people. Until that's our song, and we stop having 31 priorities at a State of the Nation address, I think we're just barking up the wrong tree with respect.
Will there be any debate about this raft of economic killing legislation that has been passed, just minutes before the previous election and quite soon afterwards, that makes it certain that we won't get any investment? Does that come onto the agenda at all, or is that, sorry, it's been passed, we're going to live with it?
Well, I think the difficulty is that that's what the GNU was designed to do, was able to reform things. But I'm not hearing any reform language coming out of the GNU. Instead, I'm hearing more of the same. And so for me, when I think about legislation that has been passed, and legislation that, whether it's about redress or triple BEE, and I've made my views quite strong on this issue to say that scrap the thing and come up with ways, as you have done, to say, how do we do redress in a way that grows the economy? And so I asked the president even last week to say to him, President, you've offered Starlink special concession. Why don't you expand that to fellow South Africans? Why can't South African businesses be treated in the same way as Starlink? So that if they choose to do what is called equity equivalent, sorry, they can be able to do so. This way, we can improve on investment and ensure that whatever legislation is hampering our ability to invest, we take it away. I share the view like anybody else. An economy that's only growing for a few is not necessarily a good economy because it creates other areas of instability. You want mass growth. So imagine if I said to a company that was employing, so I'll give you more incentives to employ people in areas 1, 2, and 3, and let's do it. I preach enough times about the township economy, but no one is going to invest in the townships if we can't get the murder rate down in townships. No one is going to invest in townships if the infrastructure, whether it's IT infrastructure or logistics infrastructure, isn't working. And yes, in the budget, the government will say, well, we're putting R1 trillion of investment over the next 3 years or the medium term into townships. But I would urge more must be done. It's not just putting R1 trillion because you're going to throw it into municipalities that are dysfunctional. Make sure it is targeted. Make sure it is in me saying to the private sector, partner with me so that what is R1 trillion can become R2 trillion. And let's make sure that we can get goods manufactured because our manufacturing space is low. We can improve on our mining sector that deals with logistics. And we can ensure that in other sectors that are not growing, that we can be big drivers of employment. So we got to focus, Mike. And I'm worried that we're living in a country that doesn't have an investment thesis or a focal point.
Well, while we talk about, you've got the budget discussion coming up, but one of the scandals that, seemingly the lid has been taken off is that PetroSA, they do our bulk purchases of energy products, mainly oil. And that's run by Mr. Untouchable himself, the chairman of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe. It's his portfolio. But it seems to be a complete and utter mess, free for all, and money is flowing out there faster than that oil can flow through the pipelines. What's the future of PetroSA? Is it just going to be a vehicle like we saw with Transnet under Zuma and Eskom, just a looting haven?
PetroSA is going to close. It's only a matter of time. Because, to your point, it's run out of money. 2, it's producing a grade of fuel that's poor. Already there are claims against it about the contaminated nature of fuel that's coming out of PetroSA. Thirdly, that PetroSA in and of itself cannot honor its contract. It doesn't have liquidity. So you think in the midst of load shedding, PetroSA should be the most profitable business in the country. But it is not, because it can't supply diesel to Eskom. Now, you can't have one state entity whose main job is to provide fuel failing in a period where there's high demand for diesel. And then ultimately it's got crony capital benefiting a few. I want to say this categorically and without doubt. PetroSA is going to shut. The reality is that South Africa started a new South African new petroleum company, which they're hoping that will do the job that PetroSA is going to do. But it's an absolute pain, because actually PetroSA isn't just a supplier of fuel. It has all the strategic sites. It has all the places. It's got all the storage facilities for fuel. It's got the opportunity in its distribution network to be able to move fuel around easier in the country. So that it shuts down is a complete failure. It's a bit like SAA. SAA, it's in its own journey at the moment in time, and I don't want to compare the two as easily as saying, well, SAA is also going down. I think SAA will pick itself up. It's got a good leader in the Mr. Lamola, who's just taken over, Professor Dr. Lamola, who's just taken over there, is busy pushing a job. But if you think about what SAA has got the best site when you go to the airport. Even at OR Tambo, their offices are right there. If you think about landing rights at all our airports, SAA gets preferential landing rights. And more seriously, all the infrastructure, whether it be lounges, all of that, SAA has got, secured routes and secured sites. PetroSA a little bit the same. So that they can't make it profitable tells me that it's not about infrastructure, it's not about anything, it's just bad leadership and corruption. And therefore, fire the leadership there. Make sure that if you are going to resurrect PetroSA, give them proper contract and give them liquidity, rather than the age-old solution in South Africa. When one fails, we start another one that looks the same.
Yeah, and what will be different about the new one, that if you say PetroSA is going to shut, who's going to take it over? Will it still be run by deployed cadres?
Well, at this stage in time, the leadership of the South African National Petroleum Company seems they've had a good launch. They've got a very sensible board chair. They've got a really good CEO who's come on board. But all I pray for is that if they do that and they take over the operations of PetroSA, that we must steer political interference away from it. Because if we repeat the same exercise, we're going to achieve the same outcomes. And I am very keen for that business to do well, because South Africa, in as far as its own strategic fuel and the use of institutions like PetroSA, can never be more crucial at a time such as this one.
Mmusi Maimane, that was great to get your insights. You're there on the inside of our politics. We will catch up with you again next week. To everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed this Political Insider look at what's going on. Mmusi, thank you for joining us. We'll see you all again next week.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Mmusi.